Everybody feared him, but not for the reason you think.
If Michael Jordan, the most feared man in basketball, says he feared Larry Bird, then you know this isn't just another NBA story. This is bigger than stats or highlights, because players weren't just afraid of Bird's athleticism. They feared what came out of his mouth. Larry would tell you exactly how he was going to score, then go do it, and there was nothing you could do to stop it. And here's the crazy part. Even Magic, Dominique, Peyton, and Kobe all admitted it. Which begs the question, if all of these legendary players feared him, what exactly made Larry Bird so terrifying? You see, Larry Bird's resume almost sounds fake when you read it out loud. I mean, 3 championships, 3 straight MVPs, which, by the way, only Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain had ever done before, 12 All-Star nods, Rookie of the Year, the whole thing. On paper, he looked like one of those once-in-a-generation guys who dominated their era. But that's the funny part. Bird never looked like the basketball superhuman he was. He didn't run or jump like Jordan and Dominique, and nobody was putting him in a dunk contest. And yet, by the middle of the 80s, the conversation about best player in the world had his name right at the top. What makes it crazier is where he came from. He came from French Lick, Indiana, a tiny working-class town where basketball wasn't just a sport, it was the only thing people had to be proud of. They called him the Hick from French Lick, and instead of running from it, Bird leaned into it. He grew up in a big family, money was tight, and basketball was the one thing that gave him an escape, so by the time he got to Indiana State, it wasn't just about putting up numbers. He was dragging a program nobody cared about into the national spotlight.
Michigan State controls. Donnelly in the backcourt. The key, many feel, to beating Michigan State is to take the early lead. When the Spartans get in front,
That 1979 NCAA title game against Magic Johnson's Michigan State is still one of the most watched college basketball games of all time. And you have to consider that Bird didn't win that night. Magic's squad was too loaded, but the fact that he even got Indiana State there was unreal. Before him, the Sycamores were invisible. Suddenly, they were on the front page of every sports section in the country. That game didn't just make for good TV. It kicked off one of the most important rivalries in sports history. Even in the loss, Bird's legend was bigger than ever, because people realized this wasn't some one-hit wonder. When the Celtics finally got him, the timing was perfect. They had just finished with 29 wins in 1979, one of their worst seasons ever. Then Bird arrives as a rookie, and bam! Suddenly they won 61. That's a 32-game swing just from one guy. And he wasn't easing into the league either. He averaged 21 points, 10 rebounds, and nearly 5 assists right out of the gate.
Allen level, Bernston brings it down. You see 2 seconds, 1, and the world champions, the Boston Celtics.
Most rookies take years to adjust to the NBA, but Larry showed up and looked like he'd been running the league for a decade. What people sometimes forget is how much he lifted everyone else. Guys like Dave Cowens and Tiny Archibald, who looked like they were on the way out, suddenly had life again. Then, Red Auerbach doubled down, pulling off the Parrish trade, drafting Kevin McHale, and later bringing in Dennis Johnson, keeping Cedric Maxwell. Before long, Boston wasn't just good again. They were the scariest team in the league. By Bird's second season, they were champions. And if you're a real NBA fan, you know that almost never happens. Rookies don't rebuild dynasties, but Larry did it in real time. Early on, the reaction around the league was pure respect. Players respected the numbers, the toughness, and the fact that he made the Celtics relevant again. But respect is surface level. Fear is deeper. Fear is when you're already second-guessing yourself before the game even starts because of the guy across from you. Those first few years set the foundation. The resume, the underdog story, the turnaround in Boston. But the actual fear? That came later, when Bird started calling his shots out loud and forcing defenders to sit there and watch him cash them in. When people talk about Bird's trash talk, it wasn't just the usual, "you can't guard me" stuff. Everyone says that. What made him different was that he told you exactly what he was going to do, then went out and did it. It wasn't an insult, it was a prophecy. That's what broke most of the guys who played him. If someone's in your ear saying they're about to hit a jumper from the wing, and then they go and drain it in your face, you're not just getting beat on the scoreboard, you're getting beat in your head. And boy, that was Bird's specialty. Take Reggie Miller's rookie year, for example.
I'm like, He's like, I am the best shooter this game, and he's saying it out loud so everyone can see. I'm like, oh my God, he's outing me at my home in front of all my family and friends. I'm the best shooter this game has ever seen.
Reggie grew up idolizing Larry, and then suddenly he was on the court against him, and Bird wastes no time checking him. He walked up to the kid and went, "You're the guy they drafted ahead of me?" The thing is, it wasn't true. Reggie was drafted in '87 and Bird in '78. But that's what made it so funny. Larry didn't care if the line made sense. He just wanted to get inside your head. And for a rookie like Reggie, that was enough. Bird then proceeded to torch Indiana with jumper after jumper, like he was making a point. Reggie has told that story a million times because it was the moment he realized Larry wasn't just a scorer. He was a talker who turned every game into psychological warfare. Then there's Shawn Kemp, who might have the most humbling Bird story of all time.
He let me know from the start of the game what he was going to do. He really did. He let me know. Before the game, he told me, he was like, he just shook his head at me. He said, man, it's going to be a up night for you.
So what did he put up?
I think he gave me, I think he gave me 46.
Kemp was this young, freakish athlete, a human highlight reel waiting to happen. He had all the bounce in the world, and Bird had none of it. So you'd think this matchup would be unfair the other way. But Bird didn't need to outjump anyone. Kemp has told the story himself. His rookie year, Bird seized him up and basically called his shot, telling him exactly where he'd score. And of course, he hit the exact shot he called. Kemp admitted later that it shook him. Because how do you defend that? You're young, you're supposed to prove yourself, and instead, the old guy just predicted your failure out loud. And then there's the famous three-point contest story. This one is classic because it wasn't even in a game.
Who come in second? Let's take the picture.
Where'd you place?
He beat me. He beat me that day. He beat me,
That wasn't a joke. That was him telling everybody the event was already over. Then he went out, hit 11 straight shots in the final round, and won it without even taking off his warm-up jacket. The whole thing was pure theater, but the scary part is that it wasn't theater to him. He really believed he was the best shooter alive, and then he backed it up in front of the entire league. The reason all this mattered was because it wasn't just about talking. Anybody can talk. What broke defenders was that Bird's words were guarantees, and he used them like a weapon. Once he called his shot, you were already thinking about it, already tense, and basically just waiting for the worst. He didn't have the quickest first step. But if you're half a second late because you're still processing what he told you he was going to do, the shot's already gone. That's why guys feared him. It wasn't just the points, it was the fact that he beat you twice, once in your head and once on the floor. Now, not everyone bought into the whole Bird mythology. Dennis Rodman, who never gave respect easily, wasn't impressed. He once said that Bird wasn't tough to guard, just a fundamentally sound white guy who could shoot. That's classic Rodman, always trying to strip the aura away. He even went further.
Larry Bird played in this era, I think he'd be in Europe.
But here's the thing. Even in tearing him down, Rodman kind of proved the point. Bird didn't scare people because he was flashy or explosive. He scared them because he turned the basics into inevitability. For a defender like Rodman, who thrived on chaos and unpredictability, Bird was frustrating because he wasn't playing mind games in the usual way. He was boring you to death with a move you'd seen 1,000 times. Except he told you about it before he did it, and you still watched it go in. That's the essence of why Bird's psychological warfare worked. He weaponized predictability. Every shot he called and every prediction he made just reinforced the idea that once Larry decided how the possession would end, there was nothing you could do. It was inevitability disguised as trash talk. And once players started to believe it, the game was over before the ball even left his hands. And it wasn't just rookies or role players that felt the Bird effect. When people talk about Bird, it's the legends themselves lining up with stories. Start with Magic Johnson. Their rivalry basically built modern basketball. They clashed in that 1979 NCAA title game, which, like I said earlier, is one of the most watched college games ever, and carried it into the NBA, where Celtics versus the Lakers became the league's heartbeat. Magic always admits that Bird wasn't just his rival, he was the guy who pushed him to his limits. Magic was showtime, flash and pace, but every time he ran into Bird, he knew there was a dude on the other end who could slow everything down and kill him with efficiency. Their battles in the 80s weren't just games, they were events, and Magic has said flat out that Bird was the toughest competitor he ever faced. Oh, don't take my word for it. See it for yourself.
That boy, he can play, man. He turned it out.
Then there's Dominique Wilkins. Everybody remembers the 1988 Eastern Conference semifinals when he and Bird went at it shot for shot. Dominique dropped 47, Bird answered with 34, but it wasn't the number that mattered, it was the timing. In the fourth quarter, Bird scored 20 points, and every bucket felt like a dagger. Dominique himself called it the best game ever played between two forwards. And even though the Hawks lost, he admitted afterward that Bird had something different. That competition became legendary, not because one guy dominated the other, but because both went supernova, and Bird walked away with the win. For a guy like Dominique, who thrived on confidence, to tip his hat that way tells you everything about the kind of respect Bird demanded in real time. Gary Payton brought a different flavor. Usually, the glove never shuts up and he never lets an opponent breathe without chirping in their ear. But even he said that Bird's trash talk was on another level. Payton remembered being shocked that Bird didn't just talk nonsense, he talked specifics. Payton called it disrespectful and beautiful at the same time, because it wasn't just a head game, it was a flex on execution. Even Kobe Bryant, who came along after Bird had retired, gave him massive credit. Kobe was a student of the game, obsessed with learning, and he studied Bird the way he studied Jordan. He said he learned how Bird manipulated defenders, how he used his body to create space, and how he never wasted movement.
I would always ask questions and try to learn as much as I could. Right?
Kobe even said Bird was one of the guys he modeled his footwork and patience after. Coming from Kobe, that's the ultimate compliment. When you line up all these testimonies, Magic, Dominique, Payton, Kemp, Kobe, the picture gets clear. These were different eras, different styles, but the same conclusion. Bird wasn't feared because of his athletic gifts. He was feared because the best players alive couldn't stop him from doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Oh, to top it all, even the GOAT himself didn't hold back.
Bird wasn't scary because of what he did. He was scary because he told you exactly how you do it.
Yeah, that was the Michael Jordan confirming everything I have been saying since the beginning. You see, when Jordan first came into the league in 1984, he was all flash, athleticism, and skill, but the Bulls were nowhere near ready to compete with the heavyweights. And the heaviest of the heavyweights at that time? Larry Bird's Celtics. Every time young MJ walked into Boston Garden, he wasn't just facing a team stacked with Hall of Famers, he was walking into Bird's personal arena. The Celtics beat up on Chicago almost every time, and Bird made sure Jordan felt every ounce of that learning curve. Jordan would drop 30, 40, even 50 sometimes, but Boston still walked away with the win, and Bird would make it clear that numbers didn't matter if the scoreboard didn't swing your way. That was the message. It's not just about being great, it's about bending the game to your will. The perfect example came in the 1986 playoffs.
First 2 points of the game for Larry Bird. Celtics have an 11-point lead. Jordan on the rebound.
Jordan had one of the most iconic performances in NBA history, dropping 63 points in Game 2 against the Celtics. In fact, it was so awesome that the Garden crowd gave him a standing ovation. It was unreal. In an interview, Bird literally said this about Jordan's game that night.
That wasn't Michael Jordan out there. It was God disguised as Michael Jordan.
Think about that. The best player in the world at that time looked across the court, saw a 23-year-old dropping the most points ever in a playoff game, and gave him divine status. But here's the kicker. Even on Jordan's greatest night, the Celtics still won. Bird finished with 36 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. It wasn't enough for him to acknowledge Jordan's brilliance. He had to remind everyone that basketball is about the ultimate outcome. That match stuck with Jordan, because if you look at the way MJ built his own mental edge later, the trash talk, the psychological battles, the way he turned every insult into fuel, you can see Bird's fingerprints all over it. Jordan studied how Bird got into guys' heads, took that formula, and weaponized it. He'd tell you he was going to drop 40, then actually drop 55. He'd invent grudges just to make himself angrier and his opponents more nervous. People credit Kobe for studying Jordan, but the truth is Jordan himself took a lot of his mind games from watching how Bird dismantled people. And when you really consider everything, it's wild. Because Jordan wasn't scared of anybody, but when he talks about Larry Bird, the tone changes. It's not bravado, it's not disrespect. It's pure respect, with a little sprinkle of fear. And if the greatest player of all time admits he felt that fear, then the case is closed. But here's the secret behind his technique. What made Larry Bird truly dangerous wasn't one skill, it was a formula he repeated every night. The first part was shot making. His release was compact, his balance never wavered, and his range stretched from the mid-post to well beyond the three-point line. The second part was his footwork. Bird used small shifts, pump fakes, and pivots so subtle that defenders often froze and were unsure of which way to move. The third part was his passing. He would bait the help defender, then punish the rotation with a pass that made you look like the one who blew the assignment. Put those three together, and Bird wasn't just scoring points, he was setting up outcomes. That's why people kept describing his game as inevitable. The strange thing is that predictability was part of his plan. Everyone knew the moves Bird liked, but that knowledge became a trap. There are a couple of highlights that show the entire formula in action. The Portland game where he played almost entirely left-handed is one of them.
Larry told all of us and the media, he said, tomorrow night's the last game of the trip, I'm going to play this one left-handed.
Bird against Kersey.
Bird was so confident in his control that he switched hands mid-game, hit layups and jumpers lefty, and still turned in a monster triple-double. It was proof that when he said he could play any way he wanted, it wasn't just trash talk. The other is the Xavier McDaniel game winner. Bird told McDaniel exactly how he would end it, where he'd catch the ball, how many dribbles he'd take, and where the shot would come from. Then he went out and executed it. But if his strength lived in rhythm and repetition, what happened when that rhythm was broken, when the shots stopped falling, or when injury slowed him down? That's the part of Bird's legacy that people don't talk about as much. Because for all the stories about Bird calling his shots and backing them up, the truth is he wasn't 100% untouchable. There were nights when the trash talk didn't land, when the shot rimmed out or the prediction fell flat. Those moments mattered because they reminded everyone that Bird wasn't some myth, he was human. What really slowed him down, though, were injuries. By the late 80s and early 90s, his body started betraying him. Chronic back problems made it painful for him to even sit down, let alone play 40 minutes of basketball. Surgeries and time on the sideline chipped away at his dominance. Yeah, he still had stretches of brilliance, but you could see the cost it took to get there. And yet, the failures never erased the legend. If anything, they made the nights he did deliver feel even bigger. Because when the rhythm was there, when the Garden lights hit that parquet floor, the aura around him became something else entirely, something more than just talent. Dominique Wilkins once said that playing Bird in the Garden was different. You weren't just up against him, you were fighting the crowd, the floor, and the history too. That building gave him extra power. And that's the next part of the story, because it wasn't just Bird you were facing, it was the Garden, the banners, and the edge his teammates enforced. Boston wasn't just a backdrop for Larry Bird, it was an amplifier. The old Garden wasn't like the shiny arenas we see today. It was cramped, the air felt heavy, and the temperature in there could make you sweat before warm-ups. The parquet floor had dead spots everywhere, and the Celtics knew exactly where they were. Opponents hated it, but Bird thrived on it. That floor, those rims, and that crowd, they all became part of his home court advantage. And then you add the fans. Boston fans weren't just loud, they were relentless. Every made shot turned into a roar that rattled visiting players. Every miss from an opponent was met with smug cheers. And if you were unlucky enough to be the guy Bird was cooking, they'd let you know about it all night long. The Celtics culture even made it worse. Red Auerbach built that team on intimidation, toughness, and flat-out winning. Bird's teammates, McHale, Parrish, Dennis Johnson, and Maxwell, weren't just sidekicks. They were enforcers who made sure nobody pushed Larry around. If you tried to get physical with him, you ended up dealing with a front line that would punish you back. That's why Boston magnified the fear factor. Facing Bird in the Garden meant you weren't just defending one man. You were up against the parquet, the history, the crowd, and a team that had winning in its DNA. It's no wonder opponents walked in already feeling a step behind. And that leads to the real question. How would Bird's brand of intimidation hold up if you dropped him into today's NBA? The answer sets up a conversation that might surprise you. On one hand, you look at the modern NBA. The pace is faster, the guys are longer, more athletic, and defenses switch everything. On the other hand, the skill set Larry brought feels built for any era. A 6'9" inches forward who could shoot from deep, rebound, pass, and run an offense? That's basically the prototype for a superstar right now. What makes Bird different from the flashy stars of today is how he went about it. He didn't need viral dunks or highlight dribbles. His trash talk wasn't typed out in cryptic tweets or posted on Instagram stories. It happened right in your face, in real time. And the thing about Bird's so-called slow game is that it wasn't slow at all. He played at his own pace, and that's exactly what killed defenders. Luka Doncic gets the same critique today, but defenders still can't speed him up. Bird had that same control decades earlier, only with sharper shooting and an even nastier edge to his words. The idea that he couldn't hang in today's game doesn't really line up when you realize guys like Luka, Jokic, and KD are dominating with some of the same qualities. So if you dropped Bird into today's NBA, would he survive? No, he'd thrive. So maybe the question isn't whether he would survive in today's game. The real question is whether anybody can handle prime Larry Bird. And if your answer is no, well, you might want to hit that like, drop your take in the comments, and subscribe, because this debate, it's only getting started.